Hey, y'all. So, if you've been keeping up, you know that I just did an episode about business, and I don't always talk about business here. A lot of times I talk about the kids and family and all that. And I know that we all kind of come from different walks of life. But what I'm hoping you're noticing about some of my conversations that I'm having with you that have a business line to it is that the messaging applies across so many areas of our life. So, I had a video that recently went viral where I was talking about seeing on the internet that people look really flashy in their business. They're spending a lot of money on building massive teams, getting warehouses, huge offices. And you don't have to be a business owner to see that and say, this seems a little off, right? Like we know what the economy is giving. We know how annoying people are. Why do you have a giant team? Right? We know all of this. So knowing all these pieces, so many people were commenting saying, look, one, it's affirming to know I'm not crazy to say I don't even really want this. I'd love to have the business. I'd love to have the side hustle. I'd love to build something that's impactful, but I don't want to be bothered with all these extras. And there were a lot of people who were like, it's actually really freeing to see this because I thought that this was what I had to do. And I want to extend that conversation to something a little bit different today. So I want to talk about the lyrebird. I don't know if you've heard of a lyrebird before or what it is, but a lyrebird, it's spelled Lyre bird, is an Australian bird, right? That is huge, massive, very ornate feathers, very gorgeous. And this bird is known overwhelmingly for its ability to mimic the sound of just about anything. Now, it's not a parrot, right? This isn't a bird that is just able to talk to you and repeat back what you say. It's not that. A lyrebird as a means of protection and also as a means of mating. So, in order to attract as well as to repel, mimic sounds. It can mimic chainsaws. It can mimic over 20 different types of birds. And I want to talk to you about lyrebirds because the behavior of a lyrebird is something that I've started seeing in business. How many of you have signed up for a course, some sort of digital education, gone to an event, picked up some knowledge, things of that sort? And there are people that you admire on the internet that are writing these great books and, coming up with theories. And it just feels like somehow in 2024, there's always some fresh, new, hot take that we've never heard of before around a business concept or around an approach or a strategy or something of that sort. And for you, if you're a regular everyday person like me, or if you are a mom or, keeping up with this world, it may feel like, man, I don't feel like I come up with anything fresh all the time, right? Or where do these people come up with these things? Or sometimes you'll hear something, you're like, man, that really hits. I feel like I've never heard it before. And especially with the internet and our ability to share content and catch things in 15-second blurbs, it can really feel like, gosh, there is so much knowledge out there. And we don't necessarily know who owns what. Well, that's why I'm telling you about lyrebirds. You may have heard the phrase, there's nothing new under the sun. And that is true. But what we're seeing in business and what I've noticed that is really difficult for me to co-sign, stomach, applaud, is that there is a lot of high level experts, right? High level people who are known in this space for, being well versed in what they're teaching and commanding large audiences and having tons of followings and we'll have another chat about clicks over connections, but there are a lot of people out there where their content that they're teaching is not theirs. I'm being very transparent, whether it is just down to reposting things and not giving attribution means credit. So you'll see on post, let's just use Instagram, for instance, like a photo post of a quote. They might write that person's name in the post as this quote is theirs, but then they won't tag them, which gives them the appropriate credit, reach, accessibility that this person is now benefiting off of. So you'll have someone who's a pretty big celebrity or influencer or expert leveraging someone else's quoted words, giving what they feel is sufficient credit, but not allowing them to benefit. So that person will go viral, that celebrity, but the originator of the content doesn't get to benefit from it, right? So that sort of thing is happening. Or you'll buy a course, or some content, and this person is teaching this content, but you'll notice that they don't really have the expertise. Expertise meaning 3 years ago they were teaching about, I don't know, supplements and wellness, and nutrition. And now they're teaching about ADHD because that's what they've recently learned about themselves. Or 5 years ago, they were an expert in graphic design and they ran a graphic design agency online. And then, they had 2 kids, in 5 years, and now they are an expert mommy coach. Now, I want to pause here, pausing, because I am not speaking down about evolving. We all evolve. We all grow. We all learn more and have more to share. And I don't want anyone here to be triggered if you feel like you are in a place where you have dynamically shifted and you want to be more, teach more, do more, because that is a beautiful thing. We are all going to speak on more. Like, I'm a business consultant. I've always been a business consultant and I teach the same things that I've taught for 10 years. But, I have evolved into sharing more aspects of my life around the work that I do. So I can understand speaking to that. And I also think that there is so much benefit from us using our own voices to speak to our people about issues that many may confront, because you can hear the same thing. Some of us have kids, right? And we all know what it's like where, mom can tell you something 10,000 times, but if auntie tells you, now you're going to listen, right? So we know how that works. And in so many ways, again, there's nothing new under the sun. What I'm speaking to, which is the difference between somebody who has a desire to be a teacher and an expert in their craft and someone who is displaying the attributes of a lyrebird, is when people feel like they can just take a course and then replicate the content, or sign up to work with a specific coach or a consultant and then replicate the content. Now, here's one thing that I think is wonderful. And I want you guys to hear this. I'm very fortunate. This has not happened to me very much. And I'm grateful because it hasn't happened to me much, because the work that I do with my clients is very customized. I do have formulas and strategies, but I also don't own them, and this is something I readily say, if you want to go to business school, if you want to take a class at your local community college, you can absolutely do that and learn a lot of the core concepts that I give to my clients. If I'm speaking to my clients about things like profit margins or overhead or loss leaders, these are all terms and things that are Googleable, right? So I'm not teaching anything brand new, right? At all. The difference is, when you go to business school or a, local college, or even take more generic courses, you're learning concepts and not practicalities. So concepts are great because you understand sort of the why behind the what, but the practicalities is, how do I apply what I need to know? Another way I describe it is, it's like going to medical school, but not actually doing residency where you practice. You become a doctor after you finish medical school. You get the letters, but you aren't allowed to actually touch people until you have done some of the work of the experience in applying what you've learned. And it matters, right? So, I'm sort of that secondary part that goes along with that first part. And that, I think, has really protected me from the lyrebirds that are in this internet space. Now, it doesn't mean that I haven't met them and confronted them. I've had people in my courses, in my content. I've had high level experts, come to me and try to figure out what it is that I do, right? Or figure out how to leverage, or have asked me, who are your people, right? Who's your speaking coach? And how did you get an agent? And how did you do these things? And I always speak, especially with my clients, readily and openly about, for my relationships and things of that sort, because I don't need to own it, right? What is mine is mine. I don't need to feel, weird about those relationships, because distinctly they're mine and I've earned them. But I also have no problem speaking to those things, because just because you get a name from me or just because you get a concept from me does not mean you'll be able to replicate it, because so much of what I've done is based on not just practice, right? Not just something I did. I didn't just apply my strategies for my business, but it's replicable, which is key. And I really hope you're picking up what I'm laying down here. One of the biggest issues I'm running into when I see these lyrebirds on the internet is that they're teaching concepts that they've learned or picked up, whether it's from following someone on TikTok or taking a course or, signing up from a mentor who's just rinsing and repeating something else that another mentor taught them, is that it's diluted. They don't have a total understanding of the material. They were barely able to replicate it in their own business, or if they did, they were able to replicate it for themselves, and their understanding around it is limited to just themselves. And then aside from that, they don't actually know how to teach. So this is the tough part. I think that a lot of us, get to a place where we know we want to evolve in business. And, some of us are meant to be workers. We're meant to create, we're meant to serve, we're meant to, take the concepts that we've learned and just apply them. But because of the internet, there's so much visibility and there's so much acclaim and pride around also being a teacher. And there's a lot of talk of difficulty around being a creator, that you have a lot of people wanting to step into the world of teaching without the qualification, capabilities, or gifting to do so. And that results in people spending their money with someone who is teaching something that, one, they may not understand, they ill understand. It may sound good, but they don't really know what they're doing, or they don't know how to translate that information so someone else can use and apply it. And it takes me to this story. I have a really good friend of mine who teaches a very specific craft. She's been doing this now for almost 15 years, maybe longer even, maybe even 20. And this is all she does, which is a very good attribute that I think a lot of you can look for, is if you're trying to find out and figure out if somebody is a lyrebird or if this is somebody who, is really qualified, how long have they been doing this thing and how often have they flip-flopped and done something else, because I've sat down with some experts who have literally told me, if you want to build a course, if you want, like, some of your faves have looked me in the face and said, if you want to build a course, if you want to build something, new and interesting and fresh, just find every book about it and follow every person who's already doing it, and then just kind of like make your own. That's plagiarism. That's theft, right? Especially if you do it without attribution. If you're going to do that, you need to have a segment where you reference where you got all the content from. Otherwise it's stealing. And anyone from academia or corporate would know that. However, a lot of experts in the entrepreneurial space do not have that background. They literally are people who just, replicate what they see, like lyrebirds. So that said, my good friend, comes from academia. She has multiple degrees from Stanford. She has multiple masters. She is extremely qualified. And again, disclaimer, I'm not saying that degrees are what make you. So for anyone who wants to come at my neck for that, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that she has reference for her skill set, right? It's not that she is just making it up, it's that she has had to study and research and has invested a ton of money, and not just money learning from other people who learned it from someone else, kind of pyramid scheme style. She has learned it in a formalized way where she would also be qualified to teach it at a high level. And then from that, over the years, as she has worked with clients, she's also developed her own systems around teaching, et cetera, et cetera. Well, she's expensive, she's expensive to work with in her field, and has built quite a name for herself working with everyone from everyday entrepreneurs to billionaires to people on TV. She writes content for TV. I mean, she's really an incredible woman who deserves every penny she gets. And she's also one of my not best kept secrets, but she's someone that I very strategically introduce people to, because she doesn't have to work with anyone. And I had a lyrebird, come to me who, is very well known in this space, extremely well known, I should say, in her space. And I have to say, to her credit, she's built a great visibility and brand for herself and following by being aspirational, right? By being someone that people can look at and say, I want to look like her, or I want to be on a stage like her, or I want to hit these certain marks, like I want to be in Forbes, or I want to have this book, or I want, it's a bullet point of what, one could, desire to have. At the same time with her, as is often with a lot of other experts, there's always the begging question of how did you get from A to B? So like when I first got into the space, I was faced with the same question as well. I will never forget the time, and I've talked about this. I want to say back in like first season, and we're on season 4 now, where I had someone call me up. I used to be a hair blogger. That was kind of my first introduction to the internet, right? Not to the craft that I do today. I am still doing the exact same job that I did 20 years ago in corporate America. All I did was shift my demographic. I went from serving, you know, hamburgers, at a school to hamburgers in a shop, right? It's the same sort of thing, just different people, right? But not everybody knew that. No one, people didn't know what I did for my 9 to 5 day-to-day job. So when I was on the internet talking about hair products and doing reviews and sharing my own hair journey, and if you've read the book, you understand, I had other hair bloggers when I started shifting to talking about more business things, because I was qualified to do it. And I wasn't just teaching made up methods. I wasn't just rolling the dice and hoping it worked. I was teaching what I was doing in corporate and what I had to do for a multi-billion-dollar corporation. And I was shocked that people did not know. It's nothing crazy, like, this is why your bank accounts matter this way. These are the tax implications, just like normal things, but just people just didn't know. And I had, she wasn't a lyrebird. She was, just someone in the space kind of question, you were talking about hair and now you're talking about this. Are you real? Like, is this like, where do you get off charging money for this? Like, what makes you think you can, like, she didn't believe that I was making the money that I was making doing the work that I was doing because she didn't understand like my qualifications and credentials. She's like, there's no way that you're charging. At the time, I think I was charging maybe $500 an hour for consulting. But again, this was like in early 2000s money, where that could do something. Right now, that's like what, gas, right? So I was charging, that was back then was like half a mortgage if you were lucky, right? Or some rent money. But, she couldn't believe that. She thought I was either making up that number and not really having clients, which I was not. And I did have clients. But she also didn't understand where I got off charging that, like doing all this for the money, which for some of y'all I know right now, you're like, not she called you on the phone and said, like it's odd to think someone would even fix their face to go out of their way to do that. And 40-year-old me looking back at, early 30s me is like, I can't even believe I facilitated that conversation. But that's a conversation for another day. The idea that the question she had in her mind made sense. It made sense. I understand it though, because we see it every day on the internet. Like, who is this 22-year-old who's saying, just sign up for this with Facebook ads and blah, blah. Like, where does it even come from? Right. And I have to tell you, this person I'm talking about before, I admire their chutzpah, right? Their ambition in coming from their background in media and then wanting to shift into, other areas and other fields. Like, over time we develop and we learn stuff, but the internet has given people a false sense of security around their knowledge without the credentials to back it up. And a couple Google searches does not an expert make. A couple well-placed TikToks that go viral do not mean that you're right or you make sense. And the fact that you've signed up for a few courses and now you are able to, get your numbers to go up a little bit does not qualify you to teach. And I don't know where that came from. And it's something that needs to be regularly addressed. And that's what happened with this person is this person, this lyrebird came to me. And I realized very quickly in watching them that the way they built their career is they kind of hop around to different mentorships or sign up different agencies and have those people curate events for them or create products for them, or they kind of, insidiously get themselves into their business to see what they can learn and try to replicate. But ultimately, this person has never done any type of formalized training, rarely gives attribution to where they got that information from. And even though they are well known in the industry and, pretty well liked, it doesn't change the fact that ultimately it's not original thought. Like there's not even a really original design applied to it. It's a replication, right? It's a mimic. And that person came to me and asked me, for an introduction to, my dear friend, because they wanted to know more, well, under the pretense of wanting to work on their craft with this person. And so they worked on their craft with this person. And then within, I would say, maybe 5 months, 6 months, they launched a course on that person's expertise. Now, it happens all the time. It happens so often that I don't think outside of this conversation, and maybe you hear about it, here and there, but I don't think people even talk about it anymore, where they're just kind of like, oh, yeah, like so and so did this and now they're an expert in this. And so, had a rash and now they're an expert in food allergies. And so, had a kid who was allergic to formula and now they're an expert in nutrition. And you're not an expert. You just had an experience and you're sharing your personal journey, and you shouldn't be speaking with conviction. You should be speaking with, clarity around your personal experience and directing people to experts who are better suited to guide them on their journey. And that is not what happens, And so now it's frustrating because, part of what inspired this, conversation is that, my dear friend, absolutely is like, listen, like you're reteaching my stuff. You know what I mean? Like in a basic way. And anyone who, again, comes from academia or corporate or anything like that is aware of, the importance of attribution, right? That it's really important to reference the resource, because if you don't, in academia and corporate, that is a litigious situation. It's a liability, right? Like you can't just be out here doing whatever, right? And it's just so interesting because lyrebirds, because of this internet space, will be confused by that. And it's only further information that they are indeed a lyrebird. They don't even realize what they're doing. So at the very beginning of this chat, I told you that there are two reasons why lyrebirds do what they do, why they mimic. The first one is for mating. They do it to draw people in. And because they know that whatever that sound is was something that was attractive, loud, familiar, whatever it is in their environment. And so it can draw people in. And, when I think of the lyrebirds in the space, the ones who have taken from the greats or, are repeating content that they find from, we've seen it on TikTok. People will follow creators of color and they will mimic their dances on their higher, bigger platform and get attention for it. And then people will think they are the creator. There was a whole thing where, Black TikTok creators went on strike around a certain song and didn't come up with a dance. And then we found that a lot of, creators of different ethnic backgrounds struggled to come up with content, for a very popular song because they weren't original in thought. They just knew how to replicate the dances in a way that got them increased visibility surrounding their privilege, to the point where some of the top creators on TikTok, especially around dance and things like that, were brought onto Jimmy Fallon, to be featured, but they were all featured doing dances they did not create because they were taken from Black TikTok creators. I mean, it really is a thing. And what made it interesting, I think, for me in watching was that they literally were like, we did not know. Like, we just thought it was everybody did the dance. Well, it's just something everyone does. Where did it come from? Give it the attribution, and that's really, really important. I mean, this has been happening since the beginning of time. Like Elvis was well known for stealing songs from Black artists, there are Black artists that are now just being added to, Hall of Fames for songs that they wrote that were popular under white artists, so it's a common thing. And it's not just a racial thing. I'm saying this happens literally all the time in every industry, but the people who should be responsible for not amplifying it should be the consumer. If you're not seeing attribution for a concept that doesn't sound novel, you should be wondering, where did this come from, right? Or how did you learn this? I get asked how I learn stuff all the time, and I'll say, oh, I got this from business school, or this isn't a new concept, or you can find out more here, or this is where this link is from, or this is where this data is derived. And I am teaching the application of this data in this specific circumstance. So I say that to say that, the reason why people mimic is because they want to draw people in. They recognize that thing is attractive, and that is one of the reasons why the lyrebird is so effective. But the other reason, and I say this because I think it's also important to understand that why people become lyrebirds is because they want protection. People are scared to do their own stuff. right? They're scared. They're scared that their stuff may not be good enough. They're scared of the judgment of putting out their own original thoughts. It feels safer if you find somebody else who is sharing content or seems to have some traction around the content or some popularity to be able to just mimic a little bit of that, and maybe what do people say? Just add your own twist to it, and go from there. It's kind of like cooking a dish. Sometimes it's easier to start from a basic recipe and just adjust the spices. But understand, if you are an honest person who is looking to maintain your time in the space and grow your audience, what you're going to do is say this recipe was derived originally from New York Times, Good Housekeeping, and I've made modifications to make it my own. That doesn't take anything away from you. And even better, understand that if you're the person who is always coming after somebody else you're copying, you are always number two. And there's no pride in that. And that's the thing that I actually told my friend was, look, this person is permanently competing for second place. How mediocre. How embarrassing. What legacy can be built on number two? So I say this to you as you are entering the business space, as you are learning and growing and trying to figure out more about where you stand and evolving and dynamic and wanting to share as you become passionate about new subjects. Beware of being a lyrebird and recognize that making sure that you still get that visibility and people will still respect you for it is as easy as giving credit where credit is due.